Hey guys, so you're probably at first be wondering where am I? This is still my apartment. Like I said before, if you watch my other videos, I was shifting a lot of stuff around so I can create a slash content area for my keyboard videos. And like it's my keyboard setup with my laptop where I'm learning my keyboard stuff. But yeah, this is my living room. I moved my whole desktop slash gaming PC setup over here. I don't game anymore too, so um, but yeah, it's over here. And today is supposed to be today's our Tuesday, so it's supposed to be my book reading days, my book summary days. And I said last video that I would finish the book today. Did not finish, and that's because I'm starting to realize I don't have enough time to fully go through books while also taking notes, and I don't want to not take notes because notes are really important because they kind of help me make sure I'm reaffirm the knowledge that I learned, and also make sure I'm intentionally reading the book instead of just passively reading it. So I'm just gonna give summaries of the progress I've made so far. So I finished chapter 6, now I'm in chapter 7. But I think I should start from the very beginning, and then after the next video maybe I'll release the video tomorrow. If not tomorrow, it'll be next week, but it'll be chapter 7 to, I guess, maybe the end, hopefully the end. But yeah, I'll just go, because I had to re-clarify about marrying because I made a small mistake about what I said before. So okay, so I'll start from the very beginning. So if you know what I'm talking about, it's about this book called Risk with the Difference by Chris Voss, and he's an FBI investigator, and he well, if you watch the first one, you already kind of know what this book is about. But I guess the first part is it's really important to understand that humans are emotional and irrational So you can't go into a negotiation expecting humans to logically be using logic in all of their scenarios in every instance, and a lot of it will be emotion based. And so that's the key thing to recognizing when you're entering a negotiation, or just in any scenario that's like a negotiation, is that humans are emotional, and you have to take into that effect. And the one most important skill to have as a person who is like in a negotiation is this empathy. That's like one of the most important skills to have, because that allows you to place yourself in another person's shoes, understand their perspective, and by doing that you can therefore show that you're listening and caring and understanding their position, even though you might not agree with their position. By being able to understand their position, you can I guess make them be more open to a conversation and feel like they're being heard. So yeah, that's like the most important thing to get out of the book at the start, before he does his different skills that he's gonna teach you. So the first chapter is about the first skill that he teaches you, which is mirroring. I made a mistake for last time saying that to repeat the last 3 words of when you're in the mirroring effect. It's not the case. They'll just repeat the same words in a different way, but in a different way. So, but I'll start from the beginning about what mirroring is. Mirroring is basically when you are able to build a connection with the other person that you're talking to, by either showing empathy and placing yourself in their shoes, and by doing that you kind of build a connection with them. It makes you feel like you understand each other, and then you start repeating. So to build this or cause this to happen, you have to repeat the other person's words but in not the exact same words, but in a very paraphrasing way or in a very similar fashion, by using your own words. And when you keep doing that, you'll eventually get to the point where when you say something, they will say it in the same way back, and you kind of use this way to get information from the other person, and also, yeah. And I have some notes, so I'm just gonna make sure I look back if I'm not missing any points. Hopefully that's okay. Yeah. And also, one really important thing when you're doing this mirroring effect is to, after you do the mirror, you make sure you pause and have at least 4 seconds of silence, so the mirroring can come into effect, and they pause and think, and then they can, answer you back. And you just continue doing this until you get the information you need. Another important thing they list is that you also have to make sure that you slow down. You're not going too fast. You make sure that the other person is able to process what you're saying, and they're able to process their emotions, because that's really important. And oftentimes, when you're in these negotiations, that you're going too fast, not able to, they're gonna feel like they're being heard if you just continue rambling them with what you're trying to say. So that's the first skill that they teach you. Second skill is labeling, like I said before. And I feel like labeling is a really important skill, because it basically shows, it makes you come off as a person who's kind and understanding, and is not judgmental, and who is just trying to understand the other person's emotions, understand and make sure that they're feeling heard, instead of attacking them. And I think the last thing you want to do in a negotiation is to make the other person feel like they're being attacked. And so that is why labeling is so important. And to start labeling, to I guess do labeling in a negotiation/conversation. And this could be an argument too. Doesn't have to be a negotiation. If you're talking to someone and trying to ask them how they're feeling, instead of you can, I guess, use a label on their emotions by starting off with, it seems like, or it sounds like, or it looks like, ... And by doing that, you kind of come off as, this is what I perceive your emotions, and how you're coming off like this to me. And this also, and because this is good because it allows the person to correct you. You're not attacking them by using I words, because I words are very intense. It makes them feel like you're directly attacking or directly targeting their emotions, and these words put you on an outside perspective, just like, this is how I perceive you. And then by you saying, it seems like you are angry, and then it gives them the opportunity to rebuttal and say, oh, I'm not angry, or it allows them to, I guess, re-clarify and give more information as to how they're feeling and how they are, and makes them question why they're being perceived this way, and potentially changes their character. But I guess the most important thing is that they give more information, because in a negotiation, information is the most important thing you want out of negotiation, because that's like how you break chinks into their armor, or you know where to go on in that conversation or the negotiation. Another important thing that you can do in labeling is called accusation audit. So a lot of the times, when you know that you have a bad perception, like someone will have a bad perception of you, will have a bad perception of the negotiation they're trying to give, one of the most important things you can do is just list off the worst things that they can say about you. So it and that's good because that allows them to give you some empathy as well. And it brings them back into it makes them like be understanding. Like I think one person gave an example of like this person had a company had to cut off a portion of their funding from another company, and that would potentially cause them to lose a worker. But because they went into that conversation saying, I know you may think that we're like a big company, and because of the contract, we had to lower the funding or something like that. And so you may be thinking that we're like a big company just trying to cut out the small companies, and not so they don't get any profit, anything from this deal at all. But that is not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is make sure that we succeed and we hit our goals in this contract. And by doing that, and by being, open and honest about their intentions, and also making sure that like, oh, we understand like this is the most horrible thing you can think about us, but because we have our intentions are different. Our intentions are not to do that, are not like the worst case scenarios, because oftentimes worst case scenarios that people think of you are exaggerations, and they're not. And you just have to re-clarify your intentions and make sure that you understand what the worst case scenario, and that the worst case scenario is not actually true. The worst case possible is not true. By doing that, it allows them a safe zone of empathy to also empathize with your situation and be more willing to accept it. I think just being open, honesty, and general too kind of helps with that. So with labeling is also heavily reliant on being empathetic, and so to have good emotioning skills, make sure you build on your empathy / EQ, your emotional intelligence. And they also talk about in this pauses of silence. Pauses of silence are important, like I said before, because it allows the other person to talk out their emotions, talk out what they're trying to say, and it also makes them feel like they're being heard. And that's what you want in these conversations. You want the other person to be the one talking. You want the other person to be the one revealing their information. It's not to say that's like a bad thing, because that's true in a lot of cases. You want to be a good listener. You want to make sure that the other person understands you're listening, understanding them and their tensions or whatever. Yeah. Moving on to chapter 4, and talks about beware yes and master no. So I really like this chapter. It kind of opened my eyes to how true this message is. And this message is basically saying you don't want, like, yes is very, very, it's not always what you want, and it's not always the correct and that is the end goal that you want, but that is not the starting goal that you want to go for. Oftentimes no is the better choice of what you want to go for, because I guess they explained this. I give an example that he talks about. So he talks about how this political person was trying to get people to donate to his fund by I guess I should go back to what the skills are that you should be learning and doing from this. So I guess he talks about how people fall into the trap of thinking that everyone says things literally or take things too literally. and that no is often sometimes the start of negotiations, because that allows the person to create a wall / boundary of what their boundaries are, and also allows them to have a sense of control. I think one important thing that he talks about is that people get very defensive, or people are very shy. People will cut off completely the negotiation if they don't have that power or that control, that like, I can back away from this, I can say no. By allowing them to say no, you give them the power, that you give them the feeling that they're in control of the situation, negotiation, and that they have the power to say no. You're not just forcing them to say yes. You're not just going for yes, because if you keep going for yes, then they're just going to feel disingenuous about your intentions, and that they don't have a say in like this negotiation at all. So it's really important to give the other person the breadth and ability to say no. And what else? And I think he talks about how if you can use no strategically, you can get a yes at the end. And so I'll go back to the example I was going to give. So, and an example is like a politician. Sorry, that's my health telling me to go sleep because it's like late right now. But honestly, I've not been hitting those goals, and I don't care because I think these are more important. But what the example he gave is a politician or someone who works in a political office, like at a place, and trying to get donations for the political campaign. And oftentimes, when he asks questions that would garner a yes, like, do you think so and so is ruining the economy? And people would answer yes. Do you think so and so is do you think the future in 20 years will be better? Yes. And by doing that, and when he asked the question, will you donate to this fund? Oftentimes, most people will say no. But by rearranging the questions and rearranging how you ask the questions to get a no, and then ending off with asking for a donation. So an example would be, will you let this future generation, go into turmoil? And they'll say no. And then you'll continue asking questions like that. And by doing that, it kind of makes them feel empowered, like they kind of have to, make a change, because they don't want these bad things to happen. And so they oftentimes at the end of the debate, at the end of the video, or I guess, sorry, at the end of the questioning, they often say yes to the donation. And so that's how important, if you can use no strategically, you can oftentimes get a yes out of the negotiation. So I really like this chapter because it kind of broke my perception of yes, answering yes, and also perception of no. No is not the end of negotiation. No is not. It's basically, it's literally the start of it, because you kind of have a direction of what the other person wants and what their boundaries are. Let me make sure I got everything out of this chapter. Yeah, I guess there's one more thing, is if someone's not answering, like a business partner is not answering your questions or your emails, you can always give them a no oriented question, such as, do you want this project to fail? And they will most likely respond with what they say. Okay, next one is chapter 5. This one's regular. This one is kind of short, but I think the main point of this is, you don't just want yes. The thing you want to try to achieve / go for is actually that's right. The reason why that's right so much better is because it gives them Um, let me make sure I'm saying this correctly. That's right is when someone says that's right, it kind of makes them reaffirms that you understood their motive, and you understand them as a person, and so if you're labeling like an emotion of theirs, and if they say that's right, then that kind of reaffirms to them that you understood their, I guess, their emotion. This one's kind of, let me make sure I'm getting this correctly. Yeah, it basically allows for a path forward because it makes them feel like you understood their emotion. 'Cause sometimes if they just say, I think they talk about you don't want to hear, you're right, because oftentimes when someone says you're right, they're saying that I understand your theory, but I don't agree with the conclusion. So they won't follow through with fixing their behavior. So yeah, that's kind of. I didn't explain that chapter the well, but that chapter is pretty short. I think the main key points to take away is that you want to make sure you aim for that's right, because that's right oftentimes is makes the other person feel like you understood them, and also make sure they understood what you're saying. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. And the next chapter I want to talk about is chapter 6, which is bend their reality. And I think this chapter is really important, and I really like this chapter because I think kind of is the point. It is what makes really good negotiators. And so this chapter talks about. So the first thing they talk about is deadlines are important because they give a sense of urgency, and oftentimes people who hide their deadlines of when their things are due, when they need things to get done by, the other person on the other end, they don't have a sense of urgency. They don't have a sense of I have to get this done by this set time. But once you set a deadline, kind of give a sense of urgency for them to close the deal, for them to once they get closer and closer to the date, they'll feel pressured to compromise or find a deal that works, and oftentimes that can lead to your favor. Yeah, so just make sure you don't hold back on deadlines if you have any. Yeah. And another important thing too is when you're approaching a negotiation, don't approach it thinking the other person thinks like you. Oftentimes, this is not empathy, this is projection, is what they say. You're projecting your thoughts on how they would react to your offer instead of being true to what your negotiations are, and that also recognizing that every decision made is irrational, because even though you can start off with a rational argument, every decision made is irrational because humans are irrational, and so there's an emotional beings, and so you can't. And so yeah, that you just have to accept that. And yeah, and okay, yeah, I'll just move on to the next one. So I think they also talked about how to, I guess, do this. To bend a person's reality, you want to first start off by sorry, this isn't a list of ordering. This is just some key takeaways from this chapter. But another important thing that I want to talk about is in this chapter is they talk about anchoring their emotions. Um, and okay. Yeah, I believe it's anchoring your emotions. Let me check, make sure that's correct. It's not anchoring emotions, it's like oh, anchoring his starting point. So anchoring his starting points is basically giving a really oftentimes people would give like a really high end deal to make a person feel a certain way about okay, let me read this so I don't give off incorrect information. Establish a range. So I guess anchoring a starting point kind of is like you setting like what range or how, so like you're like trying to say get a salary point. By setting or anchoring your point, you kind of like make them perceive that as like the location of where it should be, of like the range that you want your salary to be, and they'll try to, you know, put give a salary around that range. I guess, does that kind of make sense? And like because like what if they were going to give you like a way cheaper offer, but because you set a higher point, that kind of gives them an idea of what they should be giving you, and so that kind of increases that mark. And I think an example, very good example they gave is in a hostage situation where this guy, whose aunt was captured and threatened to be killed if they didn't give him like $150,000. But by anchoring their, by telling them and using their emotion, other things they learned in this, and also anchoring their point to a way cheaper, but not giving off the first information. The first information they gave was, I don't have enough. They lowered the price down to 50, and then they kind of did the same thing, and then they lowered it down even lower to I think 25, and then they gave their odd number of like how much they can give, 4,000 or some, or first like they anchored their point at 3,000, like that's as much as I have, and I guess that made them lower it down to 10,000, and then by saying an odd number, making them feel like, okay, that's a very specified amount that they probably don't have, that's all they have. So they said 4,725 or 26 or something, and that made the person lower it down even more to 10,000. And because the person, and then because they offered, a CD player, I guess the kidnappers or hostage takers, it made them feel like, oh, that's all the person had, and so they didn't have to, give more than they needed to. And so it kind of like gives really important, and I guess that's like a good example. And he kind of lists like things to do in like bending the person's reality, which is one, anchoring their emotions, anchoring their starting point. You can do this by doing an accusation audit. Two, let the other guy start first, so kind of have a range of where they're starting from, and you can work your way from there. Two, three is establishing a range, and this is more important for salaries. If you establish a range for salaries, you're oftentimes going to get a higher salary because they have something to work with instead of just a single salary. And five, when you talk numbers, use odd ones. So like I said before. Number six, they talked about giving a surprise gift. And this is kind of important because when you give a surprise gift, it kind of makes the other person feel inclined to return back with kindness, and that can oftentimes be an offer to your negotiation. And I guess this chapter lastly talks about how to negotiate better salary. The first thing to do is be persistent with your salary returns, what you want, and once you have your salaries, make sure you define your path of how much your salary you want in the future, salary raises to be. Third is to spark their interest in your success. So to do this, basically, you have to be good at selling yourself. You have to sell yourself, and you can do this by asking the question, how do I grow how do I grow in this company? And that by saying that, you first gain a mentor, and two, you show that you want to grow growth, and also makes them invested in you and your growth. And so that sparks some interest in them to be interested in you. So yeah, that is most of the key takeaways for that chapter. Yeah, this is gonna be a long video. Honestly, if I did more, this video would be even longer. So I'm kind of glad that I cut it down. But I mean, I'm honestly loving this book because I'm learning so much from it. And I would also still recommend you guys to read it if you guys want to read it. This is a summary, so if you just want a summary without having to read it, you can just watch this video. But if you still are interested in the book, you should definitely read it because it's a really good book. And there's a lot of things to learn from it, and he gives a really good example, even though it's kind of feels like a lot of fluff sometimes because it's not very straight to the point. But I do think sometimes like you kind of have to sell the book, so you have to make it engaging, entertaining. But the examples that he gives are also really good, and they explain the situation a lot. So I would still recommend reading it if you're wondering. But if you just want a quick summary, then feel free to continue watching these videos. So, but yeah, thank you for watching. If you watched so far, I really appreciate it.